on Motoring 90.
It is true that a cab driver can be one of the first people that a tourist might meet, and it does have an influence on a person's opinion of a city.
One thing I couldn't get over, however, was how much this car looks like the late but certainly not lamented Fiero GT.
Motoring 90 is brought to you by Quaker State. The big Q stands for quality. Always has, always will.
Hello everybody and welcome to Motoring 90. So you want to buy a car, do you? Well, there are plenty to choose from, and of course you're looking for a good deal. Well, you could always go to a dealer or look in the paper and do a private deal. Or you could go to a rental outlet, not to rent, but to purchase. That's right. Later on we're going to show you how buying a rental could turn into a good deal. But meanwhile, if you don't have a car, you're probably taking a lot of taxis. Well, Steve Grant tells us that it's an industry that is growing and growing rapidly.
Being a cab driver has got to be one of the most misunderstood and thankless occupations anywhere. First of all, everyone's always telling you where to go because quite often they're too drunk to drive themselves. Your hours are long, you're forced to eat on the run, and if you're lucky, you only have to pay $10,000 a year in car insurance. But nevertheless, there's never a shortage of people hoping to crack into this industry.
Do you know that there's more taxis out there than there are police cars? Taxi cabs are everywhere.
This is Cab School in downtown Toronto. Approximately 100 would-be drivers show up every Monday. And come Friday, about 50 will be cab drivers.
For some reason or another, the cab schools are always full. I mean, we started in 1974, and the cab schools were full then. And last year we went to 2 classrooms, and it is still full. So obviously there are a lot of people who still want to drive cabs.
This is the first course of its kind. Other cities from other provinces and other countries have come to Toronto and set up courses similar to this. So this actually is a premier course.
We see a lot of people in the classes that, for example, never driven in the wintertime. New in the country. First year they're driving in the wintertime. This must be pretty scary for them, I'm sure.
A cab driver can be one of the first people that somebody new to the city might meet. Somebody coming off a train, somebody coming off a plane, off a bus. You might be one of the first people that a new person might meet. And you will help set the impression of this city on that person.
It is true that a cab driver can be one of the first people that a tourist might meet. And it does have an influence on a person's opinion of a city. There are some cities where their industry might be of the sort that people don't even trust taking a cab. And in this city, because of the regulations, because of the attitude towards the industry, we're trying to show the public that it is a safe industry and that taking a cab can be a pleasurable experience.
But Charm School, it isn't. Over a 4-day period, our cabbies in training will be taught everything from shortcuts to radio etiquette.
You soon become accustomed to that person's voice so that you soon understand what that person is saying. Because what that person is saying is very important to you because this is dollars in your pocket.
A lot of people see it as a means of being out there, having that freedom, having the ability to control their own lives without having somebody look over their shoulder. So yes, there is a lot of romanticism in it.
Well, the reason I decided to take the cab driver's course was I had some time off from work. I work full time, and I thought it'd be a good way to make some money on the weekends. You know, I'm gonna get married next year, so I thought this would be a great way to save some extra cash and pay off the bills. So that's basically, I don't want to do it full time, just want to do it part time, and whenever I've got days off, holidays, stuff like that. So that's when basically I want to do it.
A lot of people watching the show might think, well, there's nothing to being a cab driver. You just have to know how to drive and know your way around the city. That being said, is this a tough course?
Yes, it's a very tough course, actually. There's more to being a cab driver than just knowing how to drive. The bylaws stipulate how a cab driver will drive their customer in terms of route being planned and so forth, so that you have to have a lot of knowledge of the city, intersections, roads, the way they run and so forth. So it is quite a tough course.
Sitting in a classroom is one thing. Sitting out in traffic, well, that's something else altogether. The way it stands here in Ontario, as long as you don't have a criminal record, you can get your driver's license on a Friday, take the 4-day cab course, pay your $107, and with no additional behind-the-wheel driver training, you could be driving passengers around the next Friday.
Oh, we listen. We are a very good listener. Sometimes we might solve a few problems with fellas who has problems at home. He doesn't know how to cope with it. And if he's in the influence of liquor, he'll spill the beans.
Back in 1959, when Henry Jackowitz began hacking, they didn't have cab school. And now, 31 years later, Henry isn't too impressed with the latest crop of graduates.
Way back, we were supposed to be chauffeurs. We are supposed to be clean-shaven, clean shirt, presentable, so when we approach towards the customer or the passenger, at least we are presentable. But nowadays, people do not like to have drivers with long hair, beards. They don't even have a bath. They with the body odor, and they're not even having a good shower. And it gives the cab drivers a bad name. There's a lot of drivers, they have to learn. And speeding, careless driving, some passengers, they're in their wits. They don't know either they're going to get towards the destination in one piece or not. It's all based on the driver himself, and it would be less accident if they would take their time.
In a city the size of Toronto, cabbies are often the target for young thugs looking for fast money. But despite the danger element, veterans like Henry are against the installation of protective shields.
It's like a form of a police cruiser, and I want my passenger to sit back at ease and enjoy it. It's not like a prisoner. I never had any problems. I'm nice to everybody, so they don't bother me. That I size them up, and if I don't think that if I see a person that I don't like, I don't pick them up. It's unreal. If I ever went and write a book, I think it would be the bestseller there is in the Metropolitan. I would be a millionaire by now. But I also could be shot, too.
Well, they look like they're always going to get into an accident. They rip around corners, and they're pretty fast, but I don't think they're safe enough.
Well, they're cleaner in Winnipeg. The cab itself, like, inside, some of the cabs you get in Toronto, well, I don't know. A lot to be desired, I think.
Well, that's probably my biggest beef with them, is that they're very discourteous to other drivers and other pedestrians and things like that. Even I find when I'm driving my own car, I see a cab driver come by, I try to stay clear of him because you never know what he's going to do.
I guess what bothers me is if they try and slow down to reach every red light, but that only happens on the odd occasion. But usually I found most cab drivers polite and friendly and helpful. It's not been a problem for me.
Actually, what I wind up doing with cab drivers is I start, I talk to them, and they're actually quite nice, and I don't see they have any bad reputation at all.
Hi, I'm Graham Fletcher. Coming up on Test Drive, the brand new Toyota MR2, a car with a lot of fun.
Test Drive with Graham Fletcher.
This week on Test Drive, we look at the totally new Toyota MR2. Now, this car has been redesigned from the ground up, and for anybody that likes serious driving, this car is one heck of a lot of fun. I must admit, I prefer the styling of the new MR2 to its angular predecessor. One thing I couldn't get over, however, was how much this car looks like the late but certainly not lamented Fiero GT. If you opt for the turbocharged version of the MR2, you get a rear deck fin that seems to finish off the back end and gives the entire car more substance. To handle the extra power provided by the turbo, extra engine braces have been added to the front and rear shock towers. Be warned though, the quickness, the shape and the brilliant yellow colour of this car make it a prime target for the local law enforcement agency. Along with the new look comes an upgraded chassis. This and the mid-engine format makes the car extremely agile and as near neutral as you're going to get it. During the pylon test there was virtually no body lean and only a vehicle on rails could have tracked the pylons any better. Given the prowess in the pylon test and the fact the suspension is tuned specifically for performance, I was surprised by just how compliant it actually is on the road. The MR2 features a four-wheel disc brake setup with an anti-lock brake option. Our base MR2 lacked the ABS system, but we still managed to turn in some quick, powerful straight stops on the skid pad. The large air intakes on either side of the vehicle are more than just cosmetic. They actually supply air to the engine and help keep the engine compartment cool. Our test car featured the normally aspirated 130 horsepower 16-valve 2.2 litre engine. During the acceleration tests, it managed to propel the car to 100 kilometres in a titch over 8.5 seconds. If you opt for the turbocharged version, you race through the same sprint in about 6.5 seconds. The Japanese are golfaholics, and so the success or failure of a vehicle can often hinge on its ability to carry the golf clubs. Surprisingly, the MR2 will actually hold 2 sets, minus the golf carts, of course. The spare tyre is housed under the hood, and it leaves just enough room for a small briefcase. The driver's seat is height adjustable and features adjustable lumbar supports and side bolsters. These ensure complete comfort as well as providing the necessary lateral support. The dash features a complete set of analog gauges that are neatly arranged and contoured to provide optimum visibility through the steering wheel. Ahead of the gear shift are the radio and heater controls. The empty compartment below the radio is to accommodate the upgraded audio package available. Removing the T-top roof panels is a cinch, and they store neatly and safely behind the front seats. This week I don't have so much of a pet peeve, but more a disappointment. In redesigning the MR2, Toyota have done a very good job. However, they chose to stay with these pop-up headlights, and they destroy what is a very good-looking car. Now to the scoreboard for the final ratings of the latest edition of the MR2. The stiffer chassis, independent suspension and mid-mounted engine ensure optimum handling characteristics. Even close to the limit, the MR2 is very forgiving, with only a hint of trailing throttle oversteer. The brakes on the base model are powerful and easily modulated, providing straight, short stops. Add the ABS option and things get as near perfect as possible. In base form, the MR2 is quick. Add the turbo and look out. Toyota claim 5.9 seconds to the 100k mark, which I think is a little optimistic, because first gear is extremely short. Our base model could have done with a little more insulation because the mid-engine format puts the engine extremely close to the driver's ear, meaning a lot of noise. Even when driven quickly, the base MR2 manages to turn in better than 28 miles per gallon or 10 litres per 100 kilometres. Ease up on the gas pedal and you'll beat that figure easily. While the MR2 is no Ferrari, the turbocharged model does manage to come close, giving we mere mortals a hint of the driving pleasure that can be derived from owning a truly well-bred sports car.
If you find driving a pain in the neck, you might be interested in this little gizmo. The people behind Koala Comfort claim this bag of air will relieve and prevent back and neck pain. Instructions aren't necessary. Just sit back and pump it up. The idea is to inflate until you feel some discomfort and then deflate by about 10 or 20%. Be careful though, overinflation could cause failure of the cushion. 30 pumps is the limit, so keep count.
This is the unit that converts the hydraulic pressure you've created in the brake system into mechanical action down at the wheel. It actually clamps the brake pads tight against the disc brake rotor to stop the rotor. That's our subject this week, and we want to show you how to test them and how they should be repaired or serviced when you're doing a brake job.
We're at a Budget outlet in Scarborough, Ontario, and joining me right now is Jerry Paxton of Budget. And Jerry, normally when you think of budget or Tilden, you think of renting cars, but you are selling cars here. Tell me about that.
Well, we've been in the car sales business here in Eglinton for probably 7 or 8 years, and we're able to pass along some bargains to the public, because we turn our fleet over, which amounts to about 3,500 cars every 6 months. A lot of those cars are wholesale to other dealers. We pick out some of what we call cherries and keep them for our retail lots. We have one in Scarborough here and another one in Brampton. And the savings are considerable to a retail buyer. I've been on the other side of the fence. I've been 15, 20 years with a GM dealer, and these cars, in my estimation, are every bit as good.
What year are they? What kind of mileage? What kind of shape? And how much money can you save?
They're presently they're 89 models, which are 6 to 8 months old, because we change our fleet every 6 months. We're just now starting to get our 90 models in, and you can save, depending on the particular model, but on a Cavalier or something, the lower end of it, $1,000. On a Sierra, Buick Century, up to $2,000. And they carry the balance of the manufacturer's warranty, goes with the car, so there's no risk as far as any problems or.
Now, rental cars, I mean, let's be honest, people have a tendency of driving them a little harder than they would their normal car, but you tell me that the warranty still sticks on these cars.
Yeah, they're under full coverage from the manufacturer. We just don't rent to anybody off the street. You have to be 25 years old, have a valid driver's license, and major credit card. First of all, those are qualifications. We service our cars every time they come off the road. If you rented one, the minute it comes in, the mileage is recorded. It's washed, vacuumed, all the oil levels, washer levels checked, and it's recorded the mileage again when it goes out, because we have to keep, after all, we make money by mileage, so we keep a close track of them.
How are the brakes on these cars?
Brad, the brakes are excellent. That's all checked by a mechanic. The car is serviced, a mechanical fitness certificate is issued, everything in top-notch shape before delivery is made to the customer.
Okay, well, if the brakes are okay, then obviously you don't need the services of our resident mechanic, Bill Gardiner, but nevertheless, it's brakes that Bill wants to talk about this week.
If you've ever experienced a pulling condition where your car veers sharply to the right or left when you apply the brakes, you're likely experiencing a problem with your disc brake calipers. That's our subject this week, and we want to show you how to test them and how they should be repaired or serviced when you're doing a brake job. We've got all the other wheel nuts off, so we'll just remove that last one and set the wheel aside. We can see the disc brake caliper right here. This is the unit that converts the hydraulic pressure you've created in the brake system into mechanical action down at the wheel. It actually clamps the brake pads tight against the disc brake rotor to stop the rotor. Now, it's important that this caliper is free to float back and forth in its mounting, because it has to track a little bit of runout that always exists in this disc. Even if this is machined on a brake lathe, we put it back on the car, there'll still be a little bit of runout. We don't want to feel that in the brake pedal, or we'll have a pulsating pedal. An awful lot of shops are just replacing this caliper assembly with a rebuilt unit every time they do front brakes, and that's not necessary. The first thing to do is to push the inboard pad back and compress the disc brake piston a little bit and get some clearance in those pads. Now, these are fairly new pads, but you can see that we've got a bit of clearance now, and that the caliper can float back and forth. That's what it's got to do to track that little bit of runout that we're going to have in the disc. Now, we've removed the two high tensile bolts that retain the caliper, and we're going to set those aside and lift the caliper off the rotor so you can see it a little bit better. Now, I'll remove the inboard brake pad and the outboard pad to get it out of the way. We're going to have our assistant step on the brake pedal to bring the caliper piston out. You can see it's starting to come out of the caliper bore. Now, this piston is as deep as this caliper bore. We want to get it out of there so we can have a look at it and see if there's any rust or corrosion or seizure in this bore. It's a very tight fit, and at very least we want to clean this up and service it. Now, as it comes out, you can see a little bit of rust being exposed right here. Okay, stop, Steve. Now, what we want to do at this point is lift this boot back a little bit we have to take a rounded instrument and be careful not to puncture the boot. It's quite easy to damage it. Now, we've moved the boot back, and you can see that inside that the caliper is pretty clean looking. There's just a little bit of fluid in there, but it's basically pretty clean. Now, if it looked rusty inside, as we see here, if there was scale or rust or corrosion, that would be reason to rebuild that caliper. Once we've determined that this caliper is serviceable and doesn't have to be completely rebuilt, we want to clean this area, the nose of the piston and the boot, so that we don't fold any dust or dirt and salt that's on the nose of this piston back in to the caliper. Because as we push this piston back in, that material would become trapped between the boot and the piston as it folds back in. We don't have time to completely compress it now, but we'll do that later before we install our brake pads. Now, at the very least, when we're servicing this caliper, we want to replace the caliper hardware kit. It consists of a number of bushings and grommets that allow the caliper to float back and forth on its mounts. We've got some silicone grease here. We've already replaced the grommets. They're inside this area here. We've got the new grommet in, and we greased it up with the silicone grease. It's important to note that we don't use petroleum-based grease in this area because it would swell that rubber and cause it to later bind and trap this bushing. We slide the new bushing in. That's what allows the caliper to float back and forth. We've also got smaller bushings on the outboard side here, and we wipe a little bit of silicone grease into those as well. We've replaced the other grommet and bushing over here, and it slides nice and freely too. Now when we drop our pads in and reinstall the caliper, it'll be able to move quite freely on its mounts and track that runout we talked about earlier in the rotor. We'll have a nice smooth brake application, and when we release the brake pedal, the brakes won't drag and wear the pads excessively. The vehicle will freewheel nice and easy, and we'll get maximum life out of our brake pads. Until next week, I'm Bill Gardiner for Motoring 90.
Hi, I'm Jim Kenzie, and next on Kenzie's Corner, a bit of hope for our highways and hope for our young people as well.
Kenzie's Corner with Jim Kenzie.
Well, it looks like the government of Ontario is finally going to do something about the death toll on our highways. The Ministry of Transportation is proposing a graduated driver's license program, which will consist of 3 levels. The first 2 are pretty much the same as we have now. A written test will get you a learner's permit for 365 days that will allow you to drive a car only if there's a fully licensed driver with you. The road test, similar to the Mickey Mouse thing we have now, will only get you to probationary status. Now, as a probationary driver, you won't be able to drive on freeways, and you won't be able to drive after midnight. After 1 year as a probationary driver, you'll be eligible to apply for a fully qualified license, and this will involve a second, much tougher driving test. The second test will include emergency avoidance techniques and defensive driving. The keys to this system are the 1 year of experience you must have as a probationary driver before you apply for the full license and the tougher driving test. Similar systems in the United States and Australia have been proven effective at reducing accidents and deaths among young people. Now, if you live in Ontario, I would like you to write to Mr. Bill Rye, the Minister of Transportation, and tell him that you strongly support this proposal. If you live in other provinces, bug the heck out of your Minister of Transportation and get them to do something along the same lines. Remember, the life you save could be mine. This is Jim Kenzie for Motoring 90.
We're back at Budget Rental where they are selling cars, and you are looking at a 1989 Cutlass Sierra. It has just over 25,000 kilometers on it, and it's selling for $16,500. Well, this same car is selling for $2,000 more at a dealership just down the street, and that car at the dealership is also a rental picked up at an auction. Is this a good deal? I'll let you decide. Well, that's it for this week, but make sure you join us next week for more of Motoring 90.
Motoring 90 is brought to you by Quaker State. The big Q stands for quality. Always has, always will.